I know being the last presentation of the day, I will kind of try to keep it really top, high level. And then if there's any questions and anyone is interested in a specific topic, happy to dive into it in a little bit more depth in the Q&A session. So I'm going to provide just the most recent updates. A lot is happening in the research security world. We have, of course, National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, associated implementation guidance, and then the CHIPS and Science Act, all of the research security provisions there. So we are very active. A lot is happening, but I'm going to try to provide updates which I think are most relevant to all of you today. But again, happy to take questions about anything else. I know Gene Feldman already spoke about the foreign financial disclosure reporting requirement, which is relevant for some of you, but I'm going to focus on just a few topics today, but happy to, again, field any questions if you have them beyond these topics. So I just want to highlight, we have actually completed the research security training modules. This was developed, not only it's co-funded by NSF, NIH, DOE, and DOD. These are 4 teams. It was developed through cooperative agreement. So these research security training modules were developed by the community. Again, a lot of these efforts that we're taking in research security activities, we're acknowledging that sometimes U.S. government does not perfectly understand the community, right? So this is why we're trying to be so engaged and involving all of you in developing really the training, the procedures, the policies as cooperatively as we possibly can. So these training modules are now available. They're appropriate for researchers, stakeholders, students, academics, experts, also government agencies, and even laboratories. And actually, we have a ton of interest even from our international partners and the international research community, because these are free, they're available, and why reinvent the wheel if something already works? So 4 topics. I want to just very quickly highlight, first and foremost, what is research security, how to recognize potential foreign interference, what you should be thinking about, just to build some awareness of what is research security. And actually, that's funny. Sometimes I start with that. Sometimes, I have learned never to assume. So research security, what do I mean when I say that? I'm really talking about the potential misappropriation of funding, of U.S. government funding, in this case specifically NSF funding. It's still on, right? Okay. Based on foreign influence that might pose a risk to national or economic security. So I just want to kind of start with that. So module 1 is a nice, wonderful intro. The second module focuses on the disclosure policies. This is really the underpinning of all research security policies currently across the board. Really, we want everyone to be forthcoming about conflicts of commitment, research funding, conflicts of interest, and that is the premise underneath the disclosure policy. There was recently released by the Office of Science and Technology Policy in furtherance of the CHIPS and Science Act, an effort to harmonize common disclosures. I think Gene Feldman spoke about that earlier today or yesterday. So NSF is already in compliance, but the other agencies are also coming up to speed with that to try to make it easier on the community. So not every single research funding agencies has different requirements. There now has to be a statutory, legal, or really significant reason that they'd have to diverge from those common forms. And the third module talks about how do we manage and mitigate risk. I really think that's important, and it really kind of goes hand in hand with the fourth module, which is international collaboration. Oftentimes, I think people consider research security as something that's contrary to international collaboration, and it's absolutely not the case. We can be open and secure. The goal is to acknowledge if there is perhaps a little bit of risk in the situation, and what can we do just to manage and mitigate that risk. And I think that means a lot for different folks in the audience, probably. Of course, faculty, then if you're the administrator, institution, there's all kinds of risks, there's across the board. So it's a fantastic module. And then really the fourth, really foot stomping that we want to continue to encourage legitimate, principled international collaboration. It is the reason that we are at the forefront. We attract the best talent in the whole world. We come up with the best ideas, and we have to keep working together. And we're hearing a little bit about risk, a lot of institutions and even researchers being risk averse given the geopolitical climate. And I understand it, and it's unfortunate because it's really to our detriment, right? So in addition to these modules, I'll walk you through our new policy that we're implementing at NSF, which we're trying to draw those lines in the sand. So you can very clearly see where we perceive potential risk and where we do not. And we're hoping that's going to provide a lot of clarification for all of you. So just really quickly, they're available on the website. You can take them web-based. You can incorporate them and integrate them into your learning management system. So a lot of options there. And then I will say, actually, go very quickly before I move on, just to be clear, the research security training modules themselves are not required. Institutions, researchers can do whatever research security training you like. You do not have to take the modules. You do not have to use the modules. We're trying to do it to support the community. So you don't have to put the energy, the bandwidth, the resources into such a training, and you are able to leverage those to satisfy the forthcoming requirement, which is going to be in the 25 PAPG in accordance with the CHIPS and Science Act. And then in addition, I will mention it because sometimes it comes up, the forthcoming Research Security Program Standard requirement, which we are still waiting on final guidance on that from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. One of those, there's 4 pillars within the Research Security Program Standards. Again, this was in draft form, but one of them is a research security training requirement. OSTP has said that they will honor the modules if institutions move forward with taking these 4 modules, that will satisfy that forthcoming requirement when it does become effective. So I just want to clarify that. We get a lot of questions about that. So I also want to talk to you about Secure. This is, we're calling it, in the CHIPS and Science Act, it's a really terrible, terrible acronym in the government, RSI, ISAO. It's the Research Security Integrity Information Sharing Analysis Organization. So we have changed the name nicely to Secure, safeguarding the entire community in the U.S. research ecosystem. This is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful endeavor. Again, as I already acknowledged, the geopolitical environment is really challenging. I don't think, we've never been in a situation where there's a lot of friction with such a significant peer competitor like the PRC, and it's a challenging time. And we want to make, again, those lines clear where we can be collaborating, where we shouldn't hesitate, where we shouldn't be risk averse, and provide all of you with the tools to make these decisions, because it shouldn't all be coming from the US government. We are trying to also empower the community to be making these decisions. Furthermore, we also historically have heard about sometimes there can be a clash of culture, I guess you could say, between the academic community and sometimes U.S. government, specifically law enforcement or intelligence community. I think it's funny, when I met my boss, Dr. Rebecca Kaiser, who is the chief of research security at NSF, I was working at the National Security Council, and she proposed this idea way back then of this amazing center comprised of academics who understand the culture, understand the community, and how to really inform them about and how to get the message through, right? Because the U.S. government can sit here and regurgitate all day. Of course, when we make it law and a requirement, then the PAPG, then of course you have to comply. But we're really trying to also provide the why. That we don't want this to be a compliance exercise. We're not just doing this for the just for giggles. This is something that's serious, and I think if as much as we can convey that and help you all understand the why and the tools to move forward and manage and mitigate risk, then we still get to a really great outcome. There is a little bit of a process there, but we're hoping to provide as many resources as we can to help provide that to all of you and bridge that. So we are hoping to be this Secure Center will be the bridge. I will say that we have actually just recommended the proposal right now for funding at the DD level. So we're hoping to make the award at the end of the summer. I will say that this is going to be it's a 5-year award, approximately $10 million over 5 years, each year over 5 years, so for about a total of $50 million. Really hoping that this is going to just be able to reach the community and provide, resources and services and tools to all of you in a magnitude we just haven't been able to do previously. So again, the mission, it's really about empowering the community, all of you, to make these decisions on your own. We want to provide you with information, the tools, the services to try to do that and satisfy, the requirements that we are putting out there in research security policies. And again, focused on, of course, institutes of higher education, nonprofit research institutions, and small and medium-sized businesses. But I will highlight that there is a lot of also international attention on this. And also, we're not the only ones doing this. Canada has a model. They have research centers in the United United Kingdom, they have something similar called the RCAT, the Dutch, even the Germans. I mean, so there's a lot of people already across the world that are thinking about this. And again, I mean, our ecosystem is already, borders don't matter, right? That's the whole point of, cooperation and scientific collaboration. So the more that we can all get on the same page, we hope that that'll make it easier to continue that legitimate principled collaboration. So I will just highlight, in the CHIPS and Science Act, there are specific duties that have been mandated. So again, really kind of serving as this clearinghouse for information, providing, again, helping the community. All of you understand the context of the research and identify potential illegal or improper efforts by foreign entities to obtain those results, transfer those results, set up a mirror lab and something to that effect. And then frameworks to address, in addition to just information sharing across the board. I think, again, anecdotally, we have heard that sometimes the U.S. government can come out to an institution, and if we can't provide the full picture to you, it's hard. And I understand it's a little bit of a balancing act. I'm sure it's pretty straightforward why a U.S. government agency can't maybe always say everything because of classified nature, et cetera. But the more we can tell you, the better. It doesn't make it easy on all of you when we can't provide as much context as possible. So really, that is what we're trying to get to, and providing that information about potential security threats. Again, training, reports, and then really kind of analysis with significant subject matter expertise to support you all. I will highlight, these are the things we are going to do, and then also what we are not going to do. So goal is, of course, uniform quality of service. We acknowledge, I mean, we have so many research institutions, universities in this country. People have different resources, and being able to provide a uniform quality of service across the board, even though in the CHIPS and Science Act, there is an indication that ultimately this should evolve to be a fee-based model. We're hoping very strongly to push against that, because we think this is about research security, national security. Everyone needs to have access. So we're working that very strongly. And again, we're hoping this will reduce the cost and administrative burden on some universities, providing these tools as much as we can kind of get the information out there. And I mean, again, all of these, many of them are in line with the duties in the CHIPS and Science Act, but we did do a significant amount of outreach with the stakeholders across the community. We did a Dear Colleague letter, got formal input. We've had a series of external engagements. So really trying to make sure that what this Secure Center is going to do is going to bring you value add. And I'm sorry, I should have gone back really quickly. We are not going to be providing advice, decisions, be conducting investigations, or be making policy. Again, this is an outreach arm. It is not the from an outreach perspective. It's going to be multiplying a lot of the outreach that we're doing that we just can't do on our own. But it's not going to be an official decision-making body. So I kind of alluded to the timeline already. It has been a long haul, but this is the beauty. It went through a long panel process, reverse site visit. Our Blue Ribbon panel was amazing. And now we have made that recommendation for award, but we are waiting, of course, with BFA, but hoping to make that final award late summer, hopefully latest September 1st. Again, it'll take a little bit of time, of course, for the Secure Center to stand up. But I can say there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, so we're very excited. It's gonna be kind of kick off quite well as soon as it possibly can, and then again continue to scale up over the 5 years. Okay, I just wanted to highlight, we do have something very interesting. Again, I think we're NSF, so doing research on research security is actually not too far away from our mission. Some people find this funny, but it's true, right? We are kind of trying to figure out really, what are the attributes that distinguish research security from integrity, and truly understanding the nature, scale, and scope of research security risks. We've commissioned a bunch of JSON reports, which the JSON are a unique group of scientists that understand the nexus with national security issues to try to understand how prolific these issues are, how to take a risk-based approach. But again, to the more that we can do research on this to really provide insight into the methods for identifying, mitigating, and preventing these research security violations, we think it's worthwhile. So we just actually had a workshop, which was just in May already. A lot of topics came up and discussed, and there was a virtual workshop May 2nd, and then the in-person was a 2-day later in May. So the results of that are going to be provided to NSF, and that's going to inform our areas for solicitations for funding these. And again, a lot of international interest on this as well. As I mentioned, hopefully conference findings will be synthesized a little bit in a couple months, which will lead to then subsequent funding in FY25. Okay, so this is the biggest thing I want to talk to you all about today. This is a huge undertaking. Again, there's been a significant amount of push from the Hill, various legislative requirements to obviously mitigate risk, thinking about risk, looking at research areas of concern, even in the classic fundamental context, right? Again, we keep foot stomping NSDD 189, which is still preserving fundamental research. This should be open science, et cetera. But we are trying to also respond to some of these legislative requirements to, again, make sure that we can safeguard NSF-funded research and take small efforts where we can to mitigate and manage those risks. So this new policy, we're calling it TRUST, Trusted Research Using Safeguards and Transparency. This was this became effective in the 2024 PAPG. So on May 20th, we are officially not going to roll it out until the beginning of FY25. Various reasons behind that, but I'm sure it's always a good thing when there's a little bit more time to suss through things. And in the first year, we are only going to be looking at quantum-related proposals. So the language specifically in the PAPG, what we are doing now is for the first time, we'll be reviewing proposals for research security and integrity concerns based on national security. So again, this is definitely, a little bit of a, some people really, when they hear the word national security, it's a little jolting. But again, we are trying to very transparently identify and scope what areas we have identified as potential risk for NSF. You may be aware a lot of research funding agencies are publishing their own matrices for identifying research security risks. Department of Defense just had a huge decision matrix published. I think it's already been a year, actually. I said it just, but it's been about a year. And that's, across DARPA, Army, multiple DoD services had matrices available online for quite some time, but now this is an effort to use this harmonized process to assess and mitigate risk across all the DoD services. In addition, NIST at Department of Commerce came out with their IR 8484, a long manual detailing how they manage and mitigate risk at NIST. Department of Energy has something similar. They have something that is actually going to be, they have something already that is FOUO that is, for the government that is utilized. However, now the extramural, there's a new office supporting extramural research, and they're going to be publishing something similar as well. So again, a lot happening across the board in trying to be transparent and show folks and draw those lines in the sand about where we are perceiving risk. But at the top, the goal here, these are our guiding principles. We want to respect the science. We do not want to deter brilliant, phenomenal proposals, ideas coming in any way, shape, or form. Again, this is going to be a very, very, very risk-based approach. Just to give you a ballpark, NSF receives approximately 45,000 proposals a year. Maybe, again, I mentioned during this whole first year in FY25, the pilot, we're just going to be looking at quantum-related proposals, quantum information science specifically. We estimate quantum proposals around about 2,000, 2,500 annually. And then we're going to get that number even down further, we're working with the internal subject matter experts at NSF in quantum, specifically to identify programs, maybe that they think warrant an additional level of review, and also utilizing keywords developed by the Department of Defense of sensitive quantum areas that they do perceive as being a little bit more risky than other quantum subfields. So with that, getting that number of 700 down to about 2,500 down to about 700. And then the goal is to only review those proposals that are being recommended for funding. So that number gets down to about 200. So really, just to put it in perspective, of 45,000, we're just going to look at 200 this first year. Again, quantum, I think, is an area of significant interest across the board. There's a lot happening, National Quantum Initiative, Reauthorization Act, et cetera. It really made sense for us to start here. I'll talk about kind of the next steps as we move forward. But so again, respecting the science. While all these other government agencies have something similar, and we are coordinating very, very, very closely, because we also do want to harmonize to the extent that we can, but we also have to acknowledge that we are NSF. We are, all of the proposals that we fund are curiosity driven, right? I mean, Department of Defense and Department of Energy often are mission centric, thinking about this is the goal that we have in mind, right? Now, there will inevitably sometimes be some duplication, crossover, not perfect duplication in the sense of an actual violation, but that there'll be similar proposals submitted, and that's kind of what we're trying to hone in on. We're trying to, again, use keywords, look at kind of key technology areas that are in the Chips and Science Act, again, quantum in multiple government documents, and again, trying to and get to yes. And the goal is through mitigation measures, again, as I mentioned, and that is really the goal across the board for many government agencies, DARPA specifically, and DARPA is, I think, very much kind of what we're kind of looking towards, because again, it's a DoD component, which makes us feel very safe in how they're looking at things, but they're very risk tolerant. And I want to just highlight that, because there's never going to be zero risk. That doesn't exist. It's all about risk tolerance. And that, that's for the US government. I think that's for all of you as well, right? I mean, the benefit is often going to outweigh the risk. So I just want to focus that we are focusing on mitigation tremendously. And we're also trying to be thoughtful in the implementation of this process. As I already indicated, we want to curtail beneficial activities due to risk aversion and overly broad interpretation of policy. Actually, a woman just in the last session that I was in asked about a collaboration. A PI was inquiring about a collaboration with a researcher from a country of concern. What I'm about to walk you through is, she was inquiring, would that be okay? Would that not be okay? From our perspective, unless that researcher, I mean, again, unless there is a specific association with proscribed parties and non-disclosures, which I'll walk you through in just a moment, that we would perceive as potential risk. But otherwise, that cooperation should go forward. We shouldn't hesitate. And I do understand, again, the geopolitical climate is very, very, very challenging. And is that subject to change? Yes, of course. I can't sit here just the Deputy Chief of Research Security at NSF and promise you that the landscape may not change. Of course it may. But to the extent that we can provide clarity now, it's really what we're trying to do. We also want to avoid the targeting of individuals based on nationality, country of origin. That was very, very strongly stated, and I think foot-stomped again and again and again in research security policies. We do not want to fuel xenophobia. It is very strongly why, to the extent that we're taking a country agnostic approach, we're not specifically highlighting things with countries of concern. We want to highlight, again, appointments and positions, things that I'll walk you through with specific entities that have been acting contrary to national security interests. And thirdly, we want to maintain open lines of communication with the community. I'm here today. I have been speaking nonstop, actually. And also my Dr. Rebecca Kaiser, my chief, is also, we're constantly working with the community. And definitely over this first year of implementation, we're going to continue that engagement. Again, these are this whole policy process. It is responding to specifically a few different legislative requirements. Again, the Chips and Science Act specifically says that NSF must identify research areas that may involve access to controlled, unclassified, classified information, and exercise due diligence in granting access to individuals working on such research. The FY23 appropriations language indicates that NSF should be looking at open source research capabilities that could be used by adversaries against U.S. allies or U.S. interests, therefore directing us to collaborate with the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, to compile and maintain a list of all NSF-funded open source research capabilities that are known or suspected to have an impact on foreign military operations. Wow. Like, I mean, let's be honest, that's a lot. And like, is that what NSF does? No, we think about the science, we are, everybody employed and staff, it's really, no one really has that lens. There's often so much benefit to research, benefit, the broader impacts, the intellectual merit that national security and the military application hasn't been really at the forefront of anyone's mind. But again, the geopolitical climate is changing. This is in legislation. So this policy is our response to address and mitigate potential risk where we can. We have done a lot of research. Again, I mentioned we commissioned a JSON report in 2019, which was a seminal report. It informed research security policies across the board in the United States. And we just did another one specifically to help us in response to those two legislative requirements. How should we be thinking about sensitive technology at NSF? And I just want to highlight a few of the themes that they did continue to endorse, that fundamental research is a critical component of U.S. scientific and technical leadership, which actually promotes national security in both defense and economic domains. There are definitely, again, this is often looking at, I mean, there will never be zero risk, right? I mean, maybe in some cases, but really rarely not when we're getting into a little bit more of the sensitive areas. And then we also, again, mentioning the recipients of federal funding, that they have a responsibility to protect U.S. interests, and the U.S. research community should be actively engaged in protecting those interests. And of course, again, transfer of sensitive technologies to foreign countries can create national security risks. I think we all know this. But they did really kind of stand against the fact that CUI, controlled unclassified information, that was something that was mentioned specifically in the CHIPS and Science Act. Really, it's just one component, and they really strongly said that we shouldn't get into the CUI realm, which we very strongly agree with. So we are trying not to do that in all shapes and form at the moment. And really just, again, some of the findings they said, again, openness and transparency, this leads to improvements in national security. They did come to one finding specifically related to the People's Republic of China, acknowledging that the efforts to preferentially direct fundamental research towards military needs and its decision to restrict the flow of information out of the country may severely limit the benefits of collaborations with research organizations in the PRC. I mean, yes, that is something that we are grappling with and we are working with, but this is why we are trying to specifically identify those research organizations that we feel pose the most risk for NSF. And again, a few more findings here. I will just highlight again that number 5, they thought that CUI really could have unintended consequences, highlighting the roles of working together, really focusing our resources on areas of maximum risk. I think quantum makes sense as a pilot for us moving forward. And the recommendations they provided saying that we should really have a dynamic approach for identifying research topics. They didn't like the idea of having just stagnant lists. I mean, pros, cons, right? We could sit here probably for a whole hour and debate that, even though it's really wonky and geeky. Maybe you wouldn't be interested in doing that. But they really thought that we should be making and assessing risk at the project level. And that is kind of, we're doing a mix of that in our policy implementation. Again, I think we're trying to satisfy a lot of the recommendations in there through the Secure Center as well. So I've already mentioned that was the JSON study. What are we doing? What did we do to develop this process? We also had the JSON road test our process. In the beginning, months ago, we had a rubric, and that was what we actually indicated in a footnote in the PAPG, that we would identify a rubric and share that with the public with risk-based indicators. What they found is some of the criteria, like technology readiness level, we can't even assess that because we don't collect that information in our through our solicitations. So if this is something that down the road we would want to consider, we can't even do it now. So again, that was one of their recommendations in their sensitive study report. They did say technology readiness level is something to consider when you're looking at risk. But as of right now, it's not a criteria that we will consider. They also said they didn't like the rubric. They thought it was very qualitative, having certain risk factors side by side, that it was just not the best way to be thinking about it. So they recommended doing a decision tree, and that is what we have done. So you will be seeing that shortly. Also, again, internal consultations, of course, across the board with NSF staff, interagency consultations, as I've already mentioned, DARPA, NIST, among others. So this is the process. We are looking at 3 criteria. It's going to be a step-by-step process. Firstly, we're looking at appointments and positions with U.S. proscribed parties and also research support from U.S. proscribed parties. Furthermore, I mean, as many of you probably already know, I think Jean spoke about this earlier yesterday or this morning, that senior key personnel can no longer be party to a malign foreign talent recruitment program. That is in the CHIPS and Science Act. That is a certification that does have to happen now, became effective in the 24 PAPG. So if that is identified by our office, we don't have the potential to mitigate that. We would have to refer it immediately to OIG, since that would be a falsification. So, but I will say, so how do I define U.S. proscribed parties? These 3 sub-bullets identify 3 public lists that we're going to look at to make sure that we are signaling to the community that we no longer want you to have an active appointment and position with these parties. There are many, many U.S. proscribed party lists. This is what DoD uses. We did not think we needed to go beyond what DoD uses, so we're trying to harmonize to the extent we can. So those are the 3 lists that they look at. And I'm going to highlight here in that dark blue bubble on the right, we're looking at active appointments and positions. And I'm foot stomping that because is there risk with past appointments and positions? Yes, there is. But we are willing to accept that risk and give someone the opportunity, a researcher who is here, and make a choice on their own, and not, again, it's not the researchers that we're trying to go, it's the actions of the People's Republic of China and other adversaries, right? There's problematic activities that happen at the government level. If a researcher wants to come here and, again, give up that appointment and position, and again, we are willing to take on that level of risk, right? We are willing to be that risk tolerant. And this is actually very much in sync with DARPA's approach. In the DoD approach, the goal is mitigation. If it's a past association with a proscribed party, the goal is to mitigate, and they also cannot have current. Canada actually just rolled out a research security policy, which is the same exact thing. They have a list that's very similar to the BIS entity list, and now in sensitive research areas, their senior key personnel cannot be associated with those specific individuals currently. So the second criteria we're looking at is really already the underpinning of our research security policies. We're going to be looking at non-disclosures of appointments, activities, sources of financial support, research support. And we're just going to, for this, we're going to be looking back 2 years to January 2022, because that was the date that NSPM 33 implementation guidance was published to the community. So this, again, we are still going to use this as a criteria, but acknowledging that there is still, growing pains here, and there will still be mistakes, and we know that. And it's very often, it's not always easy, but it can be apparent when there's just a mistake versus something that someone's kind of trying to hide something. So again, the goal in this, again, will be mitigation, which I'll walk you through a little bit more in a moment. But that will be the second criteria that we'll be looking at. And then the third is looking at the potential foreseeable national security application of the research. This really relates to the legislative requirements that we're getting kind of pushed to do. We're going to be honest. We don't know how it's going to go. We're almost looking at this third criteria as a pilot within a pilot, because we are NSF. We are thinking about the science. Again, my office is thinking about research security. Of course, the NSF director has testified on the Hill. The goal is for everyone to just be aware about potential research security risks. So we can make risk-informed decisions. So we're all knowledgeable. But these things take time. And we also want to be careful that we don't inadvertently shift the culture of NSF, because we want there to be cognizance of research security, but it's still about the science. We would never want a program director or a PI by not submitting a brilliant proposal because they perceive that it could be viewed as having a national security risk. It's really not the intent here. We're trying to take a very scalpel approach, risk-based approach, look at the potential most highly risky proposals, see if there's any concern, and hopefully we're estimating 90% of those cases, there's not going to be any concern, and nothing will even have to happen. And maybe in the other cases, mitigation, again, it'll be a spectrum of mitigation that we'll be considering. So let me walk you through this a little bit more. So again, these three columns are the three criteria that were just on the last slide. For the first two, appointments of positions, non-disclosures, all of that is going to happen in my office. We have a brilliant senior data analyst, Paul Morris. I don't know if any of you know him, but he has developed a great suite of tools looking at peer-reviewed journals from Web of Science, Scopus, patent data, and he has developed this tool that in seconds, he's looking at millions and millions of publications just to verify that what people have reported as their conflicts of commitment in current and pending other support, the biosketch, that everything is being reported as they should be and that there's no potential conflict. So that'll all happen in our office, in the research security office. And then you'll see for the third criteria, again, as I kind of already mentioned, we're trying to get that number when we're looking at the potential national security application of the research. Again, we're just focusing on quantum first year. We're using a combination of keyword searches and program to kind of get that number down, like I was mentioning, to about 700 quantum proposals. And then really, at that point, that proposal will go to the research security review team. And the goal there is to look, are there any appointments and positions of concern or non-disclosures or not? And then also be looking at that third criteria. Again, the JSON really thinks that the likelihood that research at NSF is going to have a national security application is going to be very, very, very rare. They estimate TRL, technology readiness level, that a lot of our proposals are kind of like in the range of 1 to 3, if any of you are familiar with that terminology. But again, we're so curiosity driven. We think that it's going to be very, very unlikely. But the goal at that research security review team is going to be a couple individuals from my office, the research security office, in addition to the program director, program officer, who is the most knowledgeable, serving as the technical expert on the proposal, and 3 quantum subject matter experts. And they're really quickly kind of doing a triage, looking at, okay, what's the potential mitigation? Okay, I think in most cases there will not be a national security application. And if there is, then we have to develop a mitigation plan to propose actually at that last stage with the institution. My office, OCRISP, taking the results of the Tiger team, will go and work with the institution to try to develop a mitigation plan. Some of you may or may not already be familiar with this. This is very common across other research funding agencies, Department of Defense, Department of Energy. But we are very cognizant that this may be new for many folks who come in for NSF proposals. So we're doing a lot. We're working with Federal Demonstration Partnership, trying to figure out how to provide mitigation templates, provide support in all of this. And again, just to put it in perspective, like this first year, we're looking at 200. We're expecting maybe only 10% to even need mitigation, hopefully. So this is, again, it's a very small number that is really going to be going through this process. And then again, if it works, then hopefully we will scale up, but again, still be taking a risk-based approach. In the very bottom right, I just want to highlight that we acknowledge, the JSON study also said this, NSF does not currently have national security training and expertise. This may be a very, very, very challenging assessment to do, specifically the third criteria, the national security application of the research. So in the very beginning stages, we're going to have an external US government consultation process. We're considering either having somebody from the Office of Director of National Intelligence, a quantum expert that can sit on that Tiger team with us as an observer and just try to help guide us in the process. Another option we're considering is perhaps just to do this under a contract and bring in national security experts in that way. So we're gonna see what works best through this pilot, because we do understand there's an optics of, you're gonna bring in somebody from an external agency to look at my proposal. Technically, we are allowed to do this. NSF has the expert consultation process. We do it all the time, actually. This is for national security reasons, so we understand there's more sensitivity, no question. But again, the goal is really, let's just mitigate the risk. Let's educate, manage, and mitigate that risk. I just walked you through who comprises the Research Security Review Team. This will really be a decision across the members. We're conveying very strongly to NSF staff, this is not something that's going to fall on the shoulders of the NSF program director or program officer. That would not be fair in any way, shape, or form, and that is definitely not what's going to happen. These are just some of the questions. A lot of this came from the JSON. Is the technology sufficient and unique enough for the national security use case in mind? Also want to think about, do the national security aspects, are they really important enough to override the societal benefits of non-national security applications? Again, acknowledging at the basic research level, if there are so many end possibilities and the benefits to society are robust, there's really, again, taking a scalpel approach and a risk-based approach there. And I also just want to highlight here, do certain mitigation measures on the project confer a meaningful advantage to the United States? When I say that, I just want to foot stomp too, that the reason we really want to mitigate, this isn't about saying no. We really do not want to say no. We just want to be cognizant, share the information with the PI, talk about any potential risks that there are, mitigate those risks. Because when we look at the really, really, really big picture, one of these backdrop questions are, where are we in technology competition, right? If the concern happens to be with an association from the People's Republic of China, if the People's Republic of China is already far beyond us in that technology area, perhaps that's something we want to consider. And the JSON really kind of touched on this very succinctly in the report. So they were saying if the United States has a definitive advantage, mitigation makes the most sense. So we can endure the burden of additional protections without negatively impacting the country's relative position. But let's say we're neck and neck, and maybe we should consider whether imposing the burden of security restrictions on U.S. researchers might slow the pace of U.S. innovation relative to foreign competitors. And lastly, if the United States is not the leader in this domain, consider whether the United States seeks to benefit from this international cooperation by elevating U.S. capabilities, despite the potential level of risk. I just want to foot stomp it because I think it's very easy to look at things in just a very, closed-minded, we are really looking at the bigger picture. So I just want to foot stomp that for all of you. And again, these are just some examples of mitigation. These are, again, working really closely with DARPA at Department of Defense. They have, again, a pretty significant risk tolerance, and it's all about mitigation at DARPA. So again, some options are, having periodic security communication. If there is concern, maybe we request them to do additional training. Maybe they have to have a little bit more communication. Hey, just making sure you no longer have that appointment. Okay. Do you have any questions, clarity, et cetera? Again, certifying that they have given up that appointment, that will be something that will be important, because we are taking on a little bit of risk there, and we are trying to honor every researcher and scientist to say, I am going to give up that funding, I'm going to give up that commitment and take on that, and we're hoping that folks will be truthful in all of this. And again, other proactive security measures. This is one example of a mitigation plan from DARPA, which I thought might be helpful for all of you, just because, again, sometimes it's very nebulous. What does mitigation really mean? How will this affect me? This is an example where a researcher was rated as a very high risk due to multiple active affiliations with PRC government-connected entities that were on one of those proscribed lists. They had several instances of active funding from those entities. So the program manager wanted to mitigate the risk, requested that the institution implement expanded reporting requirements as one part of a multifaceted mitigation plan. And so that included the researcher meeting with the institution's Office of Scientific Integrity on a quarterly basis just to review a list of his active collaborations, make sure that, whether there were any changes that should be reported. On a quarterly basis, the institution will send either an uploaded list of the researcher's collaborations or certified notification of that. The institution will require the researcher to request permission before engaging in any new foreign collaborations. This would definitely be going above and beyond. This is quite a significant mitigation plan, but I just want to demonstrate it because even with significant high risk associations, they still were able to mitigate their risk, and this is how they moved forward with it. So this is going to be a phased approach. This first year, it's going to be a learning process. This is why I foot stomped that I really, we want to engage with all of you. We are very actively trying to engage with NSF staff, but we also want to engage with the community, right? We don't want there to be a perception of fear. We're trying to provide clarity. Again, we're not taking, this is a country agnostic approach. It's specifically appointments and positions with these proscribed parties that have been identified by U.S. government agencies, acting contrary to national security interests, involved in human rights violations, et cetera. So again, that information is available. It is public. It's very transparent. So we expect to be learning a lot this first year. Again, this is a new, Tiger team, this research security review process. It's going to be brand new for us. There's going to be some, Growing pains for sure, hence why we're not rolling it out at the end of a fiscal year. We are starting in the beginning of a fiscal year. And then again, we have to look at what is the timeline, what is the bandwidth that is this going to require, and the resources across NSF staff. We want to be cognizant of that timeline, and also, is there an impact on the community? So we just, again, we're going to be developing a very extensive kind of monitoring and evaluation of this first pilot during the first year. And then I've already acknowledged a few of these. We don't know if we definitely can assess the potential, a national security application. I'm just, being totally honest. We are going to try, but we may not be able to do it, right? There are other agencies that are very, very, very familiar with this, or have original classification authorities. NSF doesn't. This is totally new territory for NSF. Hence why we are trying to have, some consultation with other U.S. government agencies as we're trying to figure out how would this work, how do we do it, what are the options that we have. So phase 2, if everything goes well, we learn, it works, we can figure out a flow process, people are comfortable, mitigations are working. The goal is for phase 2 that we could potentially expand to other CHIPS key technology areas. Some areas that we are considering are, of course, microelectronics, AI, biotechnology. The whole goal in this is to be able to scale it up to other research areas. But again, I will admit that that is the goal, but there may be some growing pains with that as well, because already we have had a huge focus on quantum, but cognizant that there may be differences across research areas. So we've had consultations with AI experts. And for example, while the maturity of the technology, the TRL, technology readiness level, may be something we want to consider down the road. That's why phase 2 has possible PAPG changes. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But from an AI subject matter expert's perspective, he said TRL was not relevant at all. So while in quantum, it's very much so, much less so in AI. And then what is that? So we're actually going to be doing a few tabletop exercises, looking actually at quantum versus synthetic biology, because again, there is some nuance here, right? So we are trying to, again, do this in a way it's scalable, but acknowledging that we don't live in a perfect world. So it's probably going to take a little bit more than that. And then again, phase 3, we hope to get to a place where we can scale this up. Mitigations are streamlined. We're expediting the review process. People are very comfortable. This is just really kind of a normal thing. And there's a lot more familiarity with the process. If everything is going well, we may be scaling up to other key technology areas. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think what we're expecting definitely for phase 1 is at least a year. Phase 2, year 2. Phase 3, it might be year 3, but it could also be year 5, right? We'll just have to kind of see how this all goes. So this is my information. Actually, since I created these slides, we even created now a new email, trust@nsf.gov, which is based on the new policy process. Again, knowing that there's going to be questions. We are going to have 2 external webinars. You know what? I'll talk to Samantha. We'll talk to because I might want to update the slides so everyone can see that I could add the webinar dates now that have been scheduled. Yeah. Okay. Great. I'll do that. Okay. And I'll add the trust. I'll add the trust email. And really, please come to us. Please don't hesitate. Our door is open. We want to encourage principled international collaboration. There's risk. Let's manage and mitigate. Yes, there's going to be very, very, very rare cases where it will be very hard and we might have to think outside the box. But we really imagine, and for the most part, we'll be able to manage and mitigate. So that's it. I have, yes. Questions. Okay.
Question online, yes. This is a question, okay. If a major piece of equipment was bought via a U.S. division of a company, but the parent company is located in China, will this affect NSF submissions that need to use this equipment, noting that the Chinese parent company may have to remote in occasionally to that equipment?
Okay, so, okay, wait, so hold on, okay. So so this piece of equipment is essential, obviously, to the research, I'm imagining.
We're gonna say yes.
But they've already procured it. I mean, is the procurement happening? I mean, I don't know, it's kind of like a weird question here. Okay, because the parent company is in the PRC, and they're concerned. I mean, the weird part for me is that in reality, if that company is a subsidiary of a company in the PRC and they already have procured the equipment, then it's really, I don't see that as an issue. I mean,
Right, it's already
again,
happened.
it is up to every institution, right, to be thinking about export controls. I mean, that is something that is within the purview of the institution to be thinking about deemed export issues, how that all plays in. So, from the NSF perspective, no, we would not. I don't think at this point in time be taking that into consideration.
Oh, anyone in the room has a question? Because I'll look up the dates for you for the webinar while someone in the room asks a question.
Yeah, does anyone have questions? And also, if that person wants a more detailed discussion, in case I'm missing a little like nuance, I'm happy to do that because, yeah, okay. All right, well, if there's no questions, we can all get out of here. Okay, all right, thank you.